I dragged my suitcase through the hallway, and every part of me screamed for rest. 2 weeks by my mother's hospital bed had drained me in ways I didn't even know were possible. The smell of disinfectant still clung to my clothes, and the steady beeping of machines echoed in my head. Stepping into my house, I craved silence, warmth, and a familiar embrace. I just wanted one quiet evening with David. Nothing more, nothing less. He hurried over, took the bag from my hand, and kissed my cheek. His smile looked kind, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Something about it felt off. "You must be exhausted," he said, his voice warm but oddly tight. I gave a weak laugh, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed on the couch like a rag doll. "Exhausted doesn't even cover it," I sighed, letting my head sink into the cushions. For a moment, I let myself believe I was home. Then my stomach growled, a harsh reminder that I hadn't eaten properly all day. "I'm too tired to even boil pasta," I admitted, half joking, half serious. David nodded quickly, too quickly. "Pizza it is, simple and quick," he replied, as though the idea had been waiting on his lips. I managed a grateful smile, relieved not to think about cooking. For one fleeting second, I thought peace might finally settle in. But peace has a cruel habit of slipping away just when you need it most. While we waited for the delivery, I tried to relax, letting the hum of the house settle me. The roses outside the window swayed in the breeze, their petals catching the last light of day. My mother always loved roses. I planted them for her years ago. Tonight, they felt like a fragile reminder of why I'd been away so long. My chest tightened, but I brushed the thought aside. I needed tonight to feel normal. David sat across from me, fidgeting with his phone. He kept glancing at it, locking and unlocking the screen like he was waiting for something. I wanted to ask, but exhaustion weighed heavier than curiosity. Instead, I closed my eyes, letting the couch swallow me whole. His voice broke the silence. "It won't be long." There was something in his tone I couldn't place, reassuring but strained, almost like he wanted the food to come faster. The doorbell finally rang, sharp and sudden, startling me back to reality. David didn't move. "I'll get it," I said, pushing myself up with a groan. The air outside was cool against my skin as I opened the door. The delivery man smiled, holding out the box. I paid, then added a $5 tip, thinking it was more than enough. He paused, looked at me, and the faintest frown crossed his face. In that moment, I felt a ripple of unease I couldn't yet name. I carried the warm box back into the living room, the smell of melted cheese already filling the air. "Dinner's here," I called softly, trying to shake off the strange look the delivery guy had given me. David was sitting at the table, his shoulders stiff, his phone face down beside him. For some reason, that small detail stood out like a warning light. I pushed the thought away. I told myself I was just tired. Setting the box down, I slid into my chair, the heat from the pizza rising between us. "See? Simple and quick," David said with a forced smile, almost like he was trying to convince himself. I nodded, though something in his eyes made me hesitate. They darted away from mine too fast, as if hiding. I sipped some water, trying to wash down the unease that had started to build in my chest. I wanted to let it go. I wanted to believe tonight was exactly what it looked like. A husband and wife sharing pizza after a long separation. But as I tore off a slice and watched David fiddle with his fork, a quiet voice inside me whispered that something wasn't right. It was subtle, fragile, but persistent. And I didn't yet know that this small moment was about to unravel everything I thought I knew about my marriage. I stood by the door for a moment longer than I should have, still thinking about the delivery man's look. His frown had lingered in my head like an echo I couldn't shake. Maybe he was just tired, I told myself. Maybe $5 wasn't enough these days. I brushed it off with a sigh, but deep down, a tiny seed of doubt started to root itself. It's strange how the smallest things can grow into storms. As I turned to close the door, his voice cut through the quiet evening. "Only 5?" he muttered, his brows furrowing. Then, with casual certainty, he added, "The redhead here last week gave me 10. My breath caught, sharp and painful, as though the air had been punched out of me. Redhead? Last week? Here? The words tangled together in my mind, refusing to make sense. But my heart understood before my head did. I froze, the box of pizza heavy in my hands, my smile collapsing into something hollow. "Excuse me?" I asked, my voice a thin thread. "What woman? It's just me and my husband living here." My hands trembled as I gripped the doorframe, the chill of the evening suddenly slicing through me. He didn't hesitate, didn't even look unsure. "I'm sure it was this house," he said firmly. And with those words, my world began to tilt. The delivery man glanced past me toward the garden, pointing casually. "Roses all over the front yard. I don't forget places like this." A redhead smiling, handed me $10. His certainty sliced through me. My stomach twisted so hard it felt like it might tear me apart. I forced a polite smile, the kind you wear when the ground under your feet is crumbling. Inside, my heart was racing so loud I was sure he could hear it. I closed the door slowly, each second feeling heavier than the last. My hand shook as it pressed the latch into place, like I was locking away the truth I didn't want to face. Turning back toward the dining room, I caught sight of David. His face had gone pale, his lips pressed into a tight line. He wasn't asking what took me so long. He wasn't even moving. He just looked caught. And that told me everything. The pizza box trembled in my grip as I walked toward him. My breath felt shallow, uneven, as though the room had shrunk around me. My mind was spinning, replaying the delivery man's words again and again. A redhead. In my house. While I was gone. I swallowed hard, fighting the lump in my throat. And when I looked at David's eyes, I saw the fear he didn't bother to hide. That fear spoke louder than any confession. I set the box down on the table with more force than I meant to, the cardboard thudding against the wood. David flinched, his eyes darting from the pizza to me, like he wasn't sure which one was more dangerous. My lips curled into something that might have looked like a smile, but inside, I was unraveling. The silence between us was deafening, filled with everything he wasn't saying. My pulse pounded in my ears. Who was she? The words burned on my tongue, but I didn't let them out. Not yet. I wanted to see if he'd offer anything, some innocent explanation, some scrap of truth. Instead, he reached for a slice, his hand trembling just enough to betray him. I watched him take a bite, chewing like it was the hardest thing he'd ever done. And that was when it hit me. His silence was more damning than any words. I forced myself to sit down across from him, though every part of me wanted to scream, to demand, to shake the truth out of him. My fingers picked at the edge of the napkin in front of me, shredding it piece by piece. I kept my face calm, my voice light, but inside, a storm was gathering. I already knew the answer, but I wanted to hear it from his lips. And soon, I would. The weight of the silence pressed on me until I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed the pizza box down so hard the lid popped open, the cheese stretching and tearing like fragile threads. David jumped in his seat, his eyes widening, but he still didn't speak. That nervous smile had vanished completely, replaced by a tight jaw and shallow breaths. My voice came out colder than I intended, but I didn't care. Who was she, David? He blinked at me, his fork clattering onto the plate. What? What are you talking about? He stammered, as if confusion could erase the truth. But I wasn't buying it. The delivery man's words echoed in my head. Redhead, smiling, $10. Don't you dare tell me it was a mistake, I snapped, my chest rising and falling like a storm tide. He described our house, our roses. That was no mistake. David rubbed the back of his neck, his eyes darting to the door, to the table, anywhere but me. I don't know what he's talking about. Maybe he got the wrong address. His voice cracked at the edges and it made my skin crawl. Wrong address? I hissed, leaning across the table. A redhead? In my home? While I was sitting at my mother's hospital bed? The words cut sharper than the knife I wished I could slam into the table between us. His face flushed, then drained of color, like a man caught under a spotlight. Alice, you're overreacting, he snapped, his voice rising as if volume could erase guilt. It was nothing. Just a friend from work. She dropped something off, that's all. My stomach knotted tighter. He said it too quickly, like a line he'd rehearsed. A friend? In my house? At night? While I was away caring for my dying mother? I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the hardwood with a shrill sound that made him wince. Don't lie to me, I said, my voice trembling with rage. I could feel the heat rise in my cheeks, a mix of betrayal and fury that left me shaking. My hands were clenched so tightly I could feel my nails biting into my palms. A friend doesn't tip the delivery guy from my front door, David. A friend doesn't smile from my porch. He stood then, slamming his palms against the table, his chair skidding back. Enough! You're making something out of nothing. His voice cracked with anger, but beneath it, I heard fear. I saw it in the way his hands fumbled, in the way his eyes refused to meet mine. And in that split second, my heartbreak began to cool, hardening into something else entirely, something sharper, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. I stared at him, my breath heavy, my chest tight. For a moment, I couldn't believe this was the same man I had built a life with. Nothing? I whispered, my voice so cold it startled even me. You call sneaking a woman into my home while I was gone nothing? My words sliced through the air like glass. He froze, his mouth open but empty, and in that silence, I heard more truth than any confession could give me. The weight of betrayal pressed down, crushing every ounce of love I thought I still had. Tears stung my eyes, but they didn't fall. I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Instead, I let the fury sharpen me. You had her here, didn't you? I demanded, my voice steady now, each word controlled like a weapon. He muttered something under his breath, but I cut him off with a glare that silenced him completely. He knew he was caught. As I stood there, shaking with both anger and clarity, something inside me shifted. The devastation that had threatened to drown me moments ago hardened into icy resolve. I wasn't just a wife betrayed. I was a woman wronged. And in that transformation, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. David's secret wouldn't remain his for much longer. After that night, I stopped yelling. I stopped asking. Silence became my weapon, sharper than any scream I could throw at him. David mistook it for surrender, maybe even forgiveness. He thought my calm meant I was done fighting. What he didn't realize was that every quiet glance, every clipped reply, was me building a wall between us. Behind that wall, I was planning. And I wasn't planning to lose. While he slept, I studied him. The way he turned his phone face down on the nightstand. The way he lingered too long in the shower, checking messages when he thought I couldn't hear. I learned to wait until he slipped, until his guard fell just enough for me to see what he worked so hard to hide. I wasn't his wife anymore. I was his shadow, patient, watchful, and hungry for the truth. The first proof came almost too easily, a crumpled receipt in his jacket pocket for a dinner I knew he hadn't shared with me. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it, but not from pain. No, this was something else. It was the rush of power, the taste of control returning to me. Each scrap of evidence was a piece of armor, and soon I would be untouchable. I started digging deeper, my eyes sharper than they had ever been. His credit card statement told stories he thought I'd never read. Hotel charges, dinners for two, ride-sharing apps late at night. Each line was a confession, and I saved every single one. I slipped copies into a folder, hidden in the back of my closet, behind boxes of winter coats. A secret archive of his betrayal, growing thicker with every careless move he made. One evening, he left his phone unlocked on the counter while he showered. My hands shook as I picked it up, but not from fear, from anticipation. Messages lit up the screen, playful, intimate words that didn't belong to me. My throat burned, but I forced myself to read them all. I needed proof, not emotion. I needed ammunition. And right there, in his own words, David handed me the bullets I'd fire back at him. Still, I stayed quiet. I kissed his cheek when he left for work, asked about his day when he returned, and pretended to believe every lie. But inside, I was building something he could never undo. Each document, each screenshot, each receipt was another brick in the fortress I was crafting. He thought he was winning. He thought he was clever. And that was exactly what made me powerful, because he didn't see the storm I was preparing. When I finally walked into my lawyer's office, I carried the folder like a weapon. My palms were clammy, but my resolve was solid. She looked through the receipts, the screenshots, the dates I'd neatly highlighted. Her eyes widened, then hardened. "You've got him," she said simply, her voice low but certain. "The infidelity clause in your prenup is ironclad. With this proof, everything is yours." Those words were the sweetest I'd ever heard. I leaned back in the chair, exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. For the first time in weeks, I smiled, not the hollow mask I'd been wearing at home, but a real smile. A smile that tasted of justice. I had been drowning in betrayal, but now I felt the ground under my feet again. The delivery man's careless words had been a spark, and from that spark, I had built a fire David would never escape. As I left her office, the city lights shimmered against the darkening sky, and I felt a shift inside me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was reclaiming my life, brick by brick, document by document. And David? He had no idea that the woman he came home to every night was the same woman who was quietly setting the stage to burn his world down. Dinner at home would never taste the same again. A week later, I set the table with a care that felt almost theatrical. Candles flickered, wine breathed in its glass, and the smell of roasted chicken filled the room. To David, it must have looked like peace, like reconciliation. He came in smiling, loosening his tie, convinced that the storm had passed. I greeted him softly, even kissed his cheek, watching the relief wash over his face. He thought this dinner was forgiveness. We sat across from each other, and I let him talk. About work, about traffic, about meaningless things. I nodded, pretending to hang on every word, my fingers tracing the rim of my glass. The silence between us no longer felt heavy. It felt powerful. Because I knew what was coming. Because I controlled the script now. Every second brought me closer to the moment I'd been waiting for. Finally, I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder, setting it down between the plates. His smile faltered, his fork clinking against the edge of his dish. "What's this?" he asked, his voice wavering. I met his eyes with a calm he'd never seen in me before. "The truth," I said simply, my hand resting on the stack of receipts and photos. The room grew quiet, the candles flickering as if they too were waiting. He reached for the folder with shaky hands, flipping through the pages like they might vanish if he blinked too hard. Receipts, hotel bills, screenshots of messages. It was all there, lined up neatly like a case file in court. His lips moved as though forming excuses, but no words came out. I just sat there, sipping my wine, watching the man who once held all the power shrink into silence. It was almost too easy. Remember the delivery man? I asked softly, my voice steady, deliberate. His head snapped up, eyes wide, the color draining from his face. He was right. There was a woman. And now, so am I. I spread the photos across the table, each one a dagger he couldn't pull out. He tried to speak, his voice cracking. Alice, please. It was a mistake. But mistakes don't come with hotel keys and lipstick-stained receipts. I leaned forward, letting him see just how calm I was. This house, the money, the life we built, it's mine now. You signed that prenup with your own hand. You cheated in my home, and the law is on my side. His mouth opened in protest, but nothing came out, only the shallow sound of his breathing. He wasn't the man who betrayed me anymore. He was just a man caught, cornered, and stripped of every lie. I stood slowly, gathering the papers back into the folder with deliberate care. Get your things and leave, I told him, my voice calm but unshakable. He stared at me like he didn't recognize the woman standing before him. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he still expected tears, pleading, or one last chance. But that Alice no longer existed. The woman in front of him was finished with his lies. David's chair scraped across the floor as he stumbled back, his face pale and slack with defeat. He muttered my name, begged me not to do this, promised it would never happen again. Each word fell flat, useless, like ashes scattered in the wind. I didn't flinch, didn't soften. The candles still flickered between us, throwing shadows on his face that made him look smaller, weaker. He had nothing left to bargain with. As he dragged his suitcase down the hallway, I followed him to the door, watching the life we'd built crumble in his hands. The roses outside swayed gently in the night air, a reminder of everything he thought he could soil and still keep. When the door finally shut behind him, the silence felt different, not heavy, but freeing. The pizza man's careless slip had given me truth, and that truth had given me everything.